I still remember the sound of expensive china clinking in the dining room as I sat alone at the small wooden table in the kitchen. The magnificent Thompson family mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut, had become my personal prison every Sunday for the past 3 years. "Elizabeth, darling," my mother-in-law Catherine's voice carried from the formal dining room, her aristocratic tone deliberately loud enough for me to hear. "Be sure to tell Sophia that we need more wine. The Chateau Margaux, not that cheap Californian bottle she brought last time." I stared down at my plate, pushing around the same food they were enjoying in the adjacent room. My husband James had promised to stand up for me today, but as usual, he had folded under his mother's imperious gaze. "She's my wife, Mother," James had whispered when we arrived. "She should sit with us." Catherine had looked me up and down, taking in my department store dress and the simple pearl necklace James had given me for our anniversary. "James, we've discussed this. Sunday dinners are for Thompson family members and our circle. Sophia can eat in the kitchen. She should be grateful to be in this house at all." I had placed my hand on James's arm, silently pleading with him to defend me, but he'd simply kissed my cheek and whispered, "Just a few more months, Soph. Once grandfather passes, things will change." Now, listening to the laughter from the dining room where James sat with his parents, his sister Amanda, and 2 hedge fund managers who were potential investors in the Thompson family's real estate business, I fought back tears. I'd married James despite his family's objections. A kindergarten teacher from a middle-class family in Ohio had no business joining one of Connecticut's oldest and wealthiest families, according to Catherine. "The help has married into better families than yours," she had sneered at our engagement party. The kitchen door swung open, and James's grandfather, Walter Thompson Sr., stepped in. At 91, he moved slowly with his ornate cane, but his eyes remained sharp and clear. "There you are, my dear," he said, pulling out the chair across from me. "I wondered where they'd hidden you this time." Despite being the family patriarch and owner of the Thompson fortune, Walter Sr. had always shown me kindness. In the 3 years since I'd married James, Walter had often sought me out during these family gatherings, preferring my company to that of his own children and grandchildren. "You shouldn't be in here, Walter," I said softly. "Catherine will be upset." He waved his hand dismissively. "It's still my house, last I checked." He looked around the kitchen with its commercial-grade appliances that Catherine had insisted on during the last renovation, though not for much longer, I suspect. I reached across the table and squeezed his wrinkled hand. "Don't talk like that. You're as strong as ever." He smiled, but there was something sad in his eyes, strong enough to see what they've become. My son and his wife, even young James. The money has changed them, made them forget what matters. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment before the kitchen door swung open again. Catherine stood there, her designer dress immaculate, diamonds glittering at her throat. "Father Walter, everyone's wondering where you've gone. You shouldn't be in here with—" She paused, not even willing to say my name. "The dining room is ready for dessert." Walter didn't move. "I'm having a pleasant conversation with my granddaughter-in-law. You're welcome to join us, Catherine, or return to your guests." Catherine's face tightened, the cosmetic treatment she regularly received, making her expression seem unnaturally fixed. "This is inappropriate. The Morlands are here to discuss the downtown development. James needs your input." "What James needs," Walter said firmly, "is to remember the values I tried to instill in this family: respect, kindness, humility." Catherine's eyes flashed with anger. "We have our traditions, Father Walter. Sophia knows her place." I felt my cheeks burn with humiliation. 3 years of this treatment had worn me down. I stood up, my chair scraping against the expensive Italian tile. "It's fine, Walter. Go enjoy your dessert. I should head home anyway. I have lesson plans to prepare for tomorrow." Walter's eyes held mine, full of apology and something else I couldn't quite read. "Things won't always be this way, Sophia. I promise you that." As I gathered my purse and jacket, I had no idea that Walter's promise would come true sooner than any of us expected. or that my life was about to change forever. The call came at 3:17 a.m., 3 days after that humiliating Sunday dinner. I fumbled for my phone in the darkness while James continued to sleep soundly beside me. "Mrs. Thompson, this is Greenwich Hospital. I'm calling about Walter Thompson Sr." My heart sank as the night nurse explained that Walter had suffered a massive stroke and was asking for me, not his son, not his grandson, me. I dressed quickly in the dark, scribbled a note for James, and drove through the empty streets to the hospital. By the time I arrived, Walter's room was already crowded with family. Richard and Catherine Thompson standing imperiously at the foot of the bed, James's sister Amanda texting rapidly on her phone, and James himself looking lost and confused in his hastily thrown-on clothes. "What is she doing here?" Catherine hissed when I entered. "I called her." Walter's voice was weak but determined. The stroke had affected his left side, but his mind remained clear. "I need to speak with Sophia. Alone." Richard stepped forward, his tailored pajamas visible beneath his cashmere coat. "Father, the doctors say you need rest. Whatever business you have can wait until morning." "It cannot wait," Walter insisted, his good hand reaching for mine. "Everyone out, except Sophia." The look Catherine gave me could have frozen the Long Island Sound. James hesitated, torn between his wife and his family, before Catherine's sharp "James" pulled him from the room with the others. When we were alone, Walter gestured weakly toward the drawer beside his bed. "My attorney, Harrison. His card is in there. Call him immediately. Tell him to bring the documents we prepared last month. Tell him code blue." I found the business card for Harrison Wells-esque, tucked beside a small leather-bound book. "Walter, what's going on?" He gripped my hand with surprising strength. "I've watched you for 3 years, Sophia. Watched how you've handled their cruelty with grace. How you've loved James despite his weakness. How you've taught those children with such dedication." His breathing was labored, but he continued. "The Thompsons were not always like this. My Elizabeth, God rest her soul, would be ashamed of what our family has become. But you remind me of her. Walter, please don't exert yourself," I pleaded, alarmed by the monitors beside his bed. "No time," he whispered. "They'll try to fight it. Stand firm. The house, the foundation. It's all detailed. Harrison will explain." His eyes, so like James's but wiser, kinder, locked onto mine. "Promise me you'll use it well. That you'll remember what wealth is for." "I promise," I said, though I had no idea what he was asking me to do. He nodded, satisfied, and closed his eyes. I sat with him until dawn broke, his breathing eventually steadying into sleep. When I finally stepped into the hallway, the entire Thompson family was waiting, their faces masks of suspicion and hostility. "What did he say to you?" Catherine demanded. I straightened my shoulders. "That's between Walter and me." 2 days later, Walter Thompson Sr. passed away peacefully in his sleep. The funeral was held at the historic Episcopal Church in Greenwich, where Thompsons had been married, baptized, and buried for generations. I sat beside James in the front pew, acutely aware of the whispers behind us. "She's just a kindergarten teacher." What did he see in her? James could have married Eliza Vandermeer. After the service, Harrison Wells approached me. In his 70s, with a distinguished grey beard and wire-rimmed glasses, he had been the Thompson family attorney for decades. "Mrs. Thompson," he said quietly, "the reading of the will is scheduled for tomorrow morning at 10 at the house. Mr. Thompson was most insistent that you be present." Catherine, overhearing this, stepped between us. "All family matters will go through my husband and me first, Harrison. You know that." The attorney adjusted his glasses. "I'm afraid Mr. Thompson's instructions were quite specific, Mrs. Thompson. All beneficiaries must be present for the initial reading. That includes Sophia." The next morning, I arrived at the Thompson mansion to find the family already assembled in Walter's study. The room reflected its owner, elegant but unpretentious, with well-worn leather chairs and bookshelves filled with classic literature rather than decorative showpieces. Catherine had positioned herself behind Walter's desk, as if already claiming ownership. Richard stood by the fireplace, while Amanda lounged on the leather sofa. James sat apart from his family, his expression unreadable. Harrison Wells entered precisely at 10, his assistant carrying a leather portfolio. He nodded to me, then addressed the room. Before I begin, I must note that Walter Thompson Sr. made significant changes to his will approximately 1 month ago. These changes were made with sound mind and in accordance with all legal requirements. Catherine's smile faltered. What changes? Harrison opened the portfolio. To begin with, the Thompson family home, including all furnishings and the surrounding 15 acres, is bequeathed in its entirety to Sophia Marie Thompson. The silence that followed Harrison's announcement was so absolute that I could hear the antique grandfather clock ticking in the corner of Walter's study. For a moment, I wondered if I had misheard. That's impossible, Catherine finally sputtered, her perfectly manicured hands gripping the edge of Walter's desk. There must be some mistake. Harrison Wells adjusted his glasses and continued reading as if she hadn't spoken. The Thompson Family Foundation, with its current endowment of $78 million, will be placed under the sole directorship of Sophia Thompson, with the express purpose of expanding educational opportunities for underprivileged children in Connecticut. Richard Thompson's face had turned an alarming shade of red. This is outrageous. She's manipulated a sick old man. We'll contest this immediately. I assure you, Mr. Thompson, Harrison said calmly, your father was of perfectly sound mind. I personally verified his competence with 2 independent physicians before these changes were made. Any contest would be futile and expensive. My eyes found James across the room. My husband sat frozen, his expression a mixture of shock and something else. Calculation. In that moment, I realized with painful clarity that he was weighing his options, measuring his loyalty to me against his family's wealth. James, I whispered, I had no idea, I swear. Before he could respond, Catherine rounded the desk and stood before me, trembling with rage. You conniving little nobody. You wormed your way into this family, pretended to care about Walter, all for this? I stood my ground, though my knees felt weak. I loved Walter. He was the only one in this family who showed me any kindness. The Thompson estate has been in our family for 5 generations, Richard thundered. It cannot, will not go to some gold-digging schoolteacher from Ohio. Harrison cleared his throat. There's more. The remainder of Walter's personal assets, approximately $12 million after taxes, is to be divided as follows: $2 million each to Richard, Catherine, Amanda, and James Thompson, under the condition that they maintain respectful relations with Sophia. Should any family member contest the will or treat Sophia with documented disrespect, their portion reverts to the foundation. Amanda, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Grandfather trapped us. The old fox actually trapped us. There must be a codicil, an exception, Catherine insisted, desperation creeping into her voice. James is his grandson, his blood. Which brings me to the final provision, Harrison continued. Walter included a personal letter for each of you. He asked that you read them in private. He handed out 4 sealed envelopes from his portfolio, then turned to me. Mrs. Thompson, Walter asked that I discuss the details of the foundation with you privately, when you're ready, of course. I nodded, still unable to fully process what was happening. The room had begun to spin slightly, and I gripped the arm of my chair. James finally stood and approached me, ignoring his mother's warning glare. Sophia, we need to talk, privately. We stepped into the hallway, leaving the rest of the family with Harrison. Once the door closed behind us, James ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I'd always found endearing. Now it just seemed calculated, like everything else about him. Did you know about this? He demanded, his voice low. Of course not. How could you even ask me that? He paced the hallway, the portrait of his ancestors watching our conversation from gilded frames. You have to understand how this looks. My grandfather leaves everything, the house, the foundation, to my wife of 3 years instead of his own family. I don't know why he did this, I said honestly, but I never asked for any of it. James stopped pacing and looked at me with new eyes, evaluating me as an asset rather than a wife. We need to think strategically. Mother and father will fight this, but if we present a united front, agree to certain compromises. Compromises, I interrupted, like continuing to eat in the kitchen while your family dines without me, being treated like an unwelcome guest in my own home. That was different before we had leverage. The word hung between us like a physical barrier. Leverage. Not love, not respect, not basic human dignity. Leverage. Read your grandfather's letter, James, I said quietly. I need some air. I walked through the grand foyer with its sweeping staircase and out onto the terrace overlooking Long Island Sound. The mansion had always intimidated me with its history and opulence. Now somehow it was mine. I pulled out my phone and called the only person I could think of, my sister Rachel back in Ohio. "Soph, how was the will reading?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. "Walter left me the house," I said, still disbelieving. "And the foundation. Millions of dollars, Rachel." "Holy shit," she breathed. "Are you serious?" "The family is furious. James is—" I trailed off, unable to articulate the transformation I just witnessed in my husband. "What are you going to do?" I looked back at the mansion, at the manicured gardens where Catherine had once told me I wasn't allowed to walk, unescorted. "I don't know yet, but I'm not eating in the kitchen anymore." When I returned inside, I found James in Walter's study, alone, his grandfather's letter crumpled in his fist. His eyes were red. "He knew," James said hoarsely. "He knew I never stood up for you, that I let them treat you that way." I waited, giving him space to continue. He wrote that my great-grandmother, his mother, was a seamstress, that the Thompsons were failing financially when she married into the family, that her business acumen saved everything. James looked up at me. He said he saw that same strength in you, that same decency. I sat beside him, processing this revelation. "James, I don't want to fight with your family, but I can't go back to the way things were." He nodded slowly. "I understand. And I'm sorry, Sophia. I've been a coward." Outside the study, I could hear Catherine's voice rising in argument with Harrison. The battle was just beginning, and I knew the Thompsons wouldn't surrender their privilege easily. James took my hand. "Whatever you decide to do with the house, with the money, I'll support you." It's time I remembered which family I actually belonged to. I squeezed his hand, wanting to believe him, but Walter had taught me an important lesson. Actions speak louder than promises, especially when millions of dollars are involved. 1 month after Walter's funeral, I stood in the grand dining room of what was now legally my home. The movers had just finished bringing in the last of the boxes from our modest apartment in Stamford. James had taken the day off to help with the transition, though tension still lingered between us. Catherine and Richard had moved out 3 weeks ago, relocating to their summer house in the Hamptons, while their attorneys continued to search for ways to invalidate Walter's will. Their parting words still echoed in my mind. "This isn't over," Catherine had hissed as Richard loaded their luggage into their Mercedes. "That house has been home to real Thompsons for generations, not opportunistic interlopers." I had simply smiled and wished them a pleasant drive to Long Island. Now, as I unpacked our wedding china, a modest set compared to the Thompsons' heirloom collection, the doorbell rang. James answered it, and I heard Harrison Wells's distinctive voice in the foyer. "Mrs. Thompson," Harrison said as he entered the dining room, "forgive the intrusion. I have some documents requiring your signature, and I thought it best to deliver them personally." I offered him tea, which he accepted graciously. As we sat in Walter's, now my, study, Harrison explained the complex structure of the Thompson Foundation. "Walter was quite specific about the direction he wanted the foundation to take under your leadership," he said, sliding a folder across the desk. "These are the educational initiatives he outlined. Of course, as director, You have considerable latitude. I opened the folder to find detailed plans for scholarship programs, teacher training initiatives, and early childhood education centers in underfunded communities throughout Connecticut. Walter had been planning this for months, perhaps years. Did he tell you why? I asked. Why he chose me? Harrison removed his glasses, polishing them thoughtfully. Walter and I were friends for over 40 years, Mrs. Thompson. I watched this family change after Elizabeth died. The genuine public service the Thompsons once valued gave way to status-seeking and social climbing. He replaced his glasses. Then you arrived. Walter said watching you teach your kindergarten class was like seeing Elizabeth again. That same natural kindness, that genuine concern for others, he believed you would restore the true purpose of the Thompson name. After Harrison left, I found James in Walter's old bedroom, now cleared of the medical equipment that had accumulated during his grandfather's final months. I've been thinking, I said, leaning against the doorframe. This house is too big for just us. James looked up, wariness in his eyes. What are you suggesting? I'm going to convert the East Wing into a preschool for children with special needs. Walter's plans for the foundation included an early intervention program. We have the space, and it would honor his legacy. James was quiet for a long moment. And my parents, Amanda. They're still your family, James. They can visit whenever they want, as our guests. But this is our home now, and we'll set the rules. I took a deep breath. Starting with Sunday dinners. Everyone eats at the same table, or they don't eat here at all. A slow smile spread across James's face, not the calculating expression I'd seen at the will reading, but something genuine, reminiscent of the man I'd fallen in love with. Walter would have loved that, he said. 6 months later, I stood in the newly renovated East Wing, watching as the first group of children explored their classrooms. The Thompson Early Learning Center had opened its doors with 6 certified special education teachers and 3 therapists on staff. Catherine had finally stopped contesting the will after Harrison revealed Walter's final contingency. Any family member pursuing legal action would be completely disinherited from future Thompson business interests. She and Richard now maintained a cold but civil relationship with us, coming for the occasional dinner but declining to involve themselves with the foundation. Amanda, surprisingly, had taken a different path. After reading Walter's letter, she had approached me with an unexpected request, a position with the foundation. Now she managed our public relations, applying her social connections to fundraising with unexpected passion. Mrs. Thompson, a young teacher, touched my arm, pulling me from my thoughts. We have a visitor who'd like to tour the facility. In the reception area stood a woman in her 70s, elegantly dressed but without Catherine's ostentatious display of wealth. Mrs. Thompson, I'm Margaret Wells, Harrison's wife. I hope I'm not intruding. Not at all, I said, extending my hand. Would you like to see what we've created? As we walked through the bright classrooms, Margaret spoke softly. Harrison told me what you've done here. Walter would be proud. We paused by a window overlooking the garden, where children were planting a vegetable patch with their teachers. You know, I was a seamstress once, Margaret said, like Walter's mother. Harrison was just a law student when we met. I looked at her with new understanding. Did you know Walter's mother? She nodded. Elizabeth was my dearest friend. She never forgot where she came from, even after marrying into the Thompson fortune. That's what Walter saw in you, someone who wouldn't be changed by wealth, but would change what wealth could do. That evening, as James and I prepared for our first formal dinner party, a fundraiser for the foundation, I stood in the dining room, rearranging place cards at the long table that could seat 20. Need help? James asked, adjusting his tie. Just making sure everyone's where they should be. I smiled, placing the final card, Catherine's, beside a major donor rather than at the head of the table where she would have automatically placed herself. James picked up his own card, positioned near the middle of the table. No special place for the Thompson heir. There are no heirs at this table, I said, straightening the centerpiece. just partners in something important. As the first guests began to arrive, I took one last look around the dining room where I had once been forbidden to sit. Tonight, teachers would dine alongside millionaires, therapists would break bread with business executives, and everyone would have a seat at the table. Walter's portrait watched over us from above the fireplace, his eyes twinkling with what I could swear was approval. I had kept my promise to him, to remember what wealth was for, not for power or status, but for making a difference in lives that needed it most. And I had kept another promise too, one I had made to myself that day in the kitchen. I would never again accept being treated as less than I was worth. As I welcomed my guests into what was now truly my home, I silently thanked Walter for giving me not just an inheritance, but a purpose.